All right, thank you. Good evening, and welcome to the council meeting of April 25th, 2022. The meeting is being live streamed on Facebook Live, and the most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Canfield website. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting packages? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? I will remind members of council that we are in decision-making mode and we should be mindful of our decision-making wheel. We have committed to making balanced and respectful decisions and adhering to our code of conduct. We will be voting by electronic means on all votes except administrative. Are there any conflict of interest issues we should be aware of before the meeting commences? Deputy Mayor?
I do apologize.
5A6.
Sorry, 5A6. Thank you. That was not 5-5. 5A6.
All right, thank you very much. I note that all members of council are present and we have quorum. We have been provided with a proposed agenda. Are there any further additions to the agenda? I do have a couple. The first item is under item 6, new business. The Valley Waste Capital Plan will be added as 6D. So you'll recall that was on our special council meeting, and because it was a special council meeting for the capital budget, it could only have the one topic on it. So this moves to this. Item 9, the in-camera will be re-identified. It is not a personnel matter, but rather a contractual legal matter that we're speaking of this evening. Councillor Sabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I was looking to move 9A to the agenda, and not in camera, but maybe it's not the same issue that CEO Troke informed me it was the other day. Is it the same?
It is a legal matter,
Right.
that Solicitor Matart and myself will brief council on.
But it's about hiring somebody.
Correct.
The breaches aren't regarding personnel, it was regarding the mayor, so I'm still not, I'm very unclear why this is in camera when it's about one of us here as council.
So the direction that I was given by council is to go out and come back with names, which includes them providing professional quotes and information that
Right.
then would form a contract. So that information would be in camera. And so that's essentially, the discussion isn't about the code of conduct
Right.
breach, it's about the process and the individual who would do the investigation.
Okay, about finding someone to investigate the breaches against Mayor Snow. That's what that, just so we're clear.
It is a
Okay.
legal
Okay.
contract as directed,
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you.
All right, if I could have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, please. Thank you. Councillor Zabian for the second?
Yep.
All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. The minutes of the March 28th, 2022 council meeting have been distributed for review. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate. If there are no changes, they're approved as distributed. Anything? All right, moving on. And our next set of minutes was our April 11th special council meeting operating budget. Are there any changes to that one? None? All right, moving right along. We have no business arising. And we are now moving on to our recommendations from our CAC meeting on April 11th, and they will be read and moved by Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Maxwell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is a Council Advisory Committee recommendation to Council, withdrawal number 3 from capital reserves. At the April 11th, 2022 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Deb Kroll submitted the request to withdraw $5,833.68 from the capital reserves, general allocation for equipment for the Canfield Police Service. So Council Advisory Committee recommends that Council withdraw $5,833.68 from the Town of Canfield Capital Reserves general allocation to partially fund the budgeted 21-22 projects as detailed in the attached report. I so move.
If I could have a seconder to that, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the withdrawal of $5,833.68 from Town of Canfield Capital Reserves General Allocation to partially fund the budgeted 2021-22 projects as detailed in the attached report. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the withdrawal of $5,833.68 from the Town of Canfield Capital Reserve General Allocation to partially fund the budgeted 2021-22 projects as detailed in the attached report. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you.
Okay. Council Advisory Committee, recommendation to council from withdrawal from capital reserves. At the April 11th, 2022 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Deb Kroll submitted the request for a withdrawal from capital reserves in the amount of $88,642.67 for costs associated with the Canfield Bridge. So Council Advisory Committee recommends that council withdraw $88,642.67 from the Town of Canfield capital reserves to satisfy Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructural Renewal Agreement 2016-004 between the Town of Canfield and the Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewals regarding the street approaches to the recently constructed Canfield Bridge. I so move.
Ms. Seconder? Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve withdrawal of $88,642.67 from the Town of Canfield Capital Reserve to satisfy Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal Agreement number 2016-004 for street approaches to the Canfield Bridge. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve withdrawal of $88,642.67 from Town of Canfield capital reserves to satisfy Province of Nova Scotia Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal Agreement number 2016-004 for street approaches to the Canfield Bridge. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you.
Council Advisory Committee recommendation to council withdraw from sanitary sewer area service. At the April 11th, 2022 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Deb Kroll submitted the request for a withdrawal from the sanitary sewer depreciation reserve to fund two projects which were over budget: the Arena Pumping Station and the Burke Subdivision Sanitary Sewer. Council Advisory Committee recommends that council withdraw $44,764.97 from the Sanitary Sewer Area Service Depreciation Reserve to partially fund the budgeted capital acquisition completed in 2021-2022. I so move.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the withdrawal of $44,764.97 from Town of Canfield Sanitary Sewer Area Service Depreciation Reserve to partially fund the budgeted capital acquisitions completed in 2021-22. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the withdrawal of $44,764.97 from Town of Canfield Sanitary Sewer Area Service Depreciation Reserve to partially fund the budgeted capital acquisitions completed in 2021-22. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried.
Council Advisory Committee recommendation to council, the rezoning in the commercial C1 zone. At the April 11th, 2022 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, Director Gentleman presented the planning report regarding a rezoning application at 294 and 288 Main Street, the Sand and Sea Shop, and part of the adjacent town-owned park. The applicant requests a change from commercial C1 to residential R2 to revert to a residential dwelling. The public hearing associated with this amendment will be held on May 30th, 2022. Council Advisory Committee recommends that council hold first reading to amend Appendix A, zoning map of the land use bylaw of the town of Canfield to rezone PIDs 55260400 and 55246813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwelling R2, and further to hold a public hearing on the matter on Monday, May 30th, 2022 at 5:00 p.m. I so move.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Zabian, thank you. And for your notes, you should note that the PID number in the motion is not the same as in the report. However, the PID number that is in the motion that we are making this evening is the correct PID as verified on Viewpoint. So just so you know that. And as well, the public hearing on November 30th, council, if you are not at that hearing, you cannot vote on second reading of it.
In November?
May 30th. It has been moved and seconded that council give first reading to amend Appendix A zoning map of the land use bylaw of the town of Canfield to rezone PID 552-60400 and 552-46813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwellings R2, and further hold a public hearing on the matter on Monday, May 30th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to give first reading to amend Appendix A zoning map of the land use bylaw of the town of Canfield to rezone PIDs 552-60400 and 552-46813 from general commercial C1 to 1 and 2 unit dwellings R2, and further to hold a public hearing on the matter on Monday, May 30th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you.
Okay, we have a Council Advisory Committee recommendation to Council, Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. At the April 11th, 2022 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, CAO Troke described the grant application to support the Donald Hills Extension Project and the requirement for a council resolution relating to this grant. Council Advisory Committee recommends that Council approve the resolution for staff to submit the project titled Completion of the Donald E. Hills Connector Road for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Green Environmental Quality Stream, and further that Council support the project and commits to provide its share of $2,595,655 toward the $9,732,488 project cost. I so move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Second.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the ICIP grant resolution for completion of the Donald Hills Connector Road water, storm, and sanitary. Be it resolved that the town of Canfield submit project titled completion of the Donald Hills Connector Road for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green, Environmental Quality Stream, and be it further resolved that council support the project and commits to provide its share, $2,595,655 towards the $9,732,488 project cost. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the ICIP grant resolution for completion of the Donald Hills Connector Road, water, storm, and sanitary. Be it resolved that Town of Canfield submit project titled Completion of the Donald Hills Connector Road for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green, Environmental Quality Stream, and be it further resolved that council support the project and commits to provide its share, $2,595,655 towards the $9,732,488 project cost. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, if you could step away. The time is 6:49.
Okay, our last Council Advisory Committee recommendation to Council about this concerns the sale amendment of Video World. At the April 11th, 2022 meeting of Council Advisory Committee, CAO Troke described the request by Video World to amend their purchase and sale agreement to allow for a smaller building on the lot. Video World bought the lot last year with the intent to construct an 8,000 square foot structure. Due to building material cost increases, they want to build a warehouse that is 5,000 square feet. Council Advisory Committee recommends that Council revise the building size from 8,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. I so move.
The seconder? Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the request for a revised building size from 8,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on the adoption of the motion to approve the request for a revised building size from 8,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And the time is 6:51. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. All right, moving on to our council reports. First report is Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last council meeting was March 28th, and last CAC was March 11th. No, sorry, April 11th. I only had one meeting in the last month. March 20th, we had Valley Waste. They have ordered new software for the scale house. It's a 5-year contract. I think it's about $12,000 a year. It will give accurate information as to where waste is coming from, so we should be able to get, this is what Kings County is, this is what Canfield is. It also has a camera to go with it. And the other thing that they're doing is they put out an RFP for green bins, $98,000. Apparently we need more green bins. And I asked, and I don't want to offend any organization, but they're not, ones that we've heard about recently that are not, it's not the same bin company. And another thing, and I didn't write it down, but we're still optimistic in the extended producer responsibility is going to be coming very, very soon, and that will put a little bit more money in our coffer to put towards recycling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. The meeting of today, I did notes right up until the 20th, sorry. Last council meeting, March 28th, CAC, April 11th. I've had 2 meetings. One is the Valley Ren LOC. We talked about goals and objectives, operations, activity update, chair update, and the working group update with the IMSA. And with the KPPT meeting, financial reports, board governance policies, an update on roles. There's quite a few policies that they've revised, so we will be reviewing those within the next month. And that's kind of how the meeting went. A lot of the meetings that I have right now, they were probably all put off until this week. So I'll report these meetings in the next go-round. And then did the public forum, Main Street Ballroom. I totally enjoyed that meeting. Such great feedback from the residents and great ideas. And I'm still getting a couple of emails from people about ideas that they want. So that's obviously, they enjoyed it as well. And then at the end, I did a few meeting calls and Zooms, about an annual operating budget meeting, AVCC meeting, had a great one on climate call and greening the world's economy. I had a meeting with the mayor, and I also met with the new manager at KPPT.
Nice. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. The last council meeting attended, of course, it was March 28th, and the last council advisory meeting was April 11th. On March 14th, we had a CAC meeting, which was our regular meeting. March 31st, Annapolis Valley Trails meeting, which I'll talk about in a minute. April 1st, CAO appraisal meeting was a meeting to look at the evaluations of our CAO. April 8th was the inclusion and access meeting, and I will talk about those a little bit later. Under Town of Canfield events, on March 30th, I attended the Canfield Ravine Advisory Meeting. So far, $11,000 has been raised for the treatment of HWA, which is the hemlock woolly algid, in the ravine. Grants are also available, and applications are going out to raise more money for that. An HWA detection and public education session will be held at the Gorge on May 1st, with a rain date set for May 7th. Stay tuned for more information on our Town of Canfield website for that. The public is still asked to stay away from the ravine as this area is unstable. This group is working hard to find the best way to stop the destruction of the hemlocks, and there has been a lot of information presented by the experts, both in that group and from externally. I can say that we are in good hands with this group. It's a fantastic group. Town of Canfield Public Forum on March the 30th is another Canfield event. Kudos to the staff for this well-organized event and the public for their participation. Many great ideas were presented during this forum as well as passed into our administrative team afterwards. These ideas will help shape our direction over the next few years. Thanks to Councillor Zabian for his effort to make this forum a reality. Committee meeting synopsis, the Annapolis Valley Trails meeting on March 31st. At this meeting, the coalition was tight on cash flow. There were some outstanding bills at the time. Grants are now in the process of being applied for. Our chair was to contact CAO with regard to presenting to council. I think that contact has been made. We discussed the work plan, and this year the work will center around our disaster plan. The disaster plan involves several steps: prevention, protection, mitigation, assessment, response, and recovery. This plan has been based on the emergency measures strategy. There were 5 natural disasters in 6 weeks. Probably didn't realize that when we were going through them at the time, but that's the case. And all of them affected trees on the trail as well as some structural damage, so to bridges and culverts and things like that. Annapolis, Royal, and Numinus were the hardest hit areas. The Harvest Moon Trail is not up to tourist standard in many places. Grading will be the first priority, so that's the first thing that users will see. Kiosks and mowing will be delayed. Highbury School has been helping with cleanup and in New Minas, and they've also helped with cleaning up the garbage behind the Miners Landings apartments for us, and I sent thanks to them for assisting with that. There's a lot of construction debris down over the bank there, and you can certainly see it from the trail. Many thanks to all those involved. Our Visitor Information Center should be aware that the Kings County portion of the Harvest Moon Trail is good, but not road bike friendly. In other words, the bikes with the small tires, and likely will not be friendly for them this summer. A letter has been sent to Department of National Resources asking for some help to do cleanup along the Harvest Moon Trail. Cyclists should follow the Harvest Moon Trail website to follow cleanup progress this summer. The annual general meeting will be held June 9th at the Louis Millet Center from 1:30 to 3 p.m. And that's the news from the Trail Association. On April 8th was the Inclusion and Access meeting. Town Hall accessibility update was given. Our buildings in the process of being assessed for accessibility. Big year for our active transportation plan, year one. We're seeing that now in our capital budget. Citizens will see a fair amount of work being done. A proposal for year two will come to council, and year 3 and 4 planning will begin. The street naming task team is moving right along. Notes on the process and policy are being passed along to administration for a first look, and this may already have been done. This task force that's looking at that is looking at a celebration when the new policy is in place and Cornwallis Street is renamed. There will also be a healing ceremony conducted at the same time. The timeline for completion is sometime in the fall, and more information will be coming along about that. Miscellaneous events, March 25th, we had a Rules of Order meeting and process workshop. This was one of the most worthwhile sessions I have attended during my time on council. All councilors and mayors should have an in-service on this right after the election each term. All councilors should be given the Roberts Rules book as well, and I thank our CAO for making this available to us after we attended this session. Up until this session, I felt like it was figure it out as you go. Not a great way to learn or to be effective as a councilor. Indeed, this session was a breath of fresh air, and that's my report.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. All meetings attended, council and CAC, as the other councillors have noted. April 8th, Canfield Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee. I'm not going to reiterate. Councillor Maxwell has covered all of it off. I don't have anything in my report different to add than what she had. March the 11th, operating budget meeting. Prior to CAC, we reviewed the operating budget and expect, perhaps with a few minor changes, to recommend same to council. I see it's on the agenda for tonight. April 2022 was regional sewer. Yes, there was no meeting, but it didn't seem necessary, I guess, this month. So reports were distributed outlining our BODs, TSSs, and hydraulic loads, and all were in line for Canfield with those reports. March 25th was a Roberts Rules session. All of mayor and council attended. It was a great refresher. I found it very helpful, as I think everybody else on council did. March 30th was a public participation meeting. It was very well attended and very well organized, and great to see such a diverse representation from our citizens, and a great array of comments and suggestions that we can and hope to use in our strategic planning session, and also in our Inclusion and Accessibility Advisory Committee. And April 1st was the CAO evaluation meeting with mayor and council, and it was a pretty light month overall, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Thank you. The same council meetings were attended. I also attended the Recreation Regional Facility meeting, where we had a bit of an update on some proposed sites, as well as kind of looking at the scope of the community engagement process. More information is going to be available after the next meeting, I suspect, and then certainly that group will likely present again to council to give a little bit more information. My other committees, Police Commission was moved from April 1st to the end of the month, just to accommodate some members. So we were going to be just pushing that to the end of the month as our regularly scheduled meeting. KCA PTA, everything is ticking along there with planning for Spring Fling underway. It's the first Spring Fling they haven't flung in 2 years, so it'll be good to get that back and welcome new students to KCA and certainly welcome the incoming primary class. So staff and the community are really looking forward to that. While it didn't make the deadline cutoff, I do want to mention that I did attend the regional library meeting last week. And at that meeting, the CEO, Anne-Marie, has announced her retirement, so she is retired now. And I want to thank her here for her hard work and her advocacy for the regional library, and also to welcome Angela Reynolds, who some people will know from the Canfield Library, who will be acting as the interim CEO for now. So welcome and thank you. And just attending some of the Canfield events, the Easter egg hunts that were around town while we weren't successful. I'll blame that on myself and not my children, although they did not pull their fair share. That was a really wonderful event planned by the Parks and Rec department, and I think specifically Ashley. So thank you for that. And also the Canfield Home Show. It was really nice to see it back in action in town. It's also nice to see people bopping around over the weekend down there. So it was really good. Good to see things returning that you don't fully realize you missed until they were taken away. So that's wonderful. Glad to see all of that stuff coming back. I've attended the same Robert's Rules training, which was wonderful, and to Councillor Maxwell's point, should be something that new councillors take on at the beginning of their term. It was eye-opening and really, believe it or not, quite interesting. So it was really helpful to have that. I also attended Hike for Hospice, so I'm on that committee, and we are doing the Hike for Hospice on May 1st. So it'll leave from Centre Square and walk towards New Minas on the trail. So I encourage everybody to come out on May 1st to see that and to see the good work that's happening at the hospice on the hospital site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zabia.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I attended all the same meetings that the rest of council did. So because I'm the last, well, I'm not the last one, I guess you are, I'm not going to bore you with the dates, but I am going to take this time just to address something that troubled me today. On a daily basis, I receive inquiries about the former Robinson property. I'm asked what the cost is to the taxpayers for this legal action and how long it will take, or how long this lot could potentially sit. Because I was not part of this decision-making process, I will not comment, nor can I provide citizens answers to their questions. I continue to encourage the citizens of Canfield to contact council on this matter. Today, however, I was very uncomfortable when we were told as a council that a citizen's letter would not be read during this council meeting. A citizen took the time to write a letter to council and asked to have it read during the meeting. I want them to know that I've read it, and I don't agree with this format and the way this has been handled. This was never the practice of council as far back as I can remember before all of our terms. What are we telling our citizens when we ignore or censor them? Every citizen of the town of Canfield has the right to express their opinion. It is my belief that we should not be censoring people, and I'm very disappointed to see this happen today. As an elected official, it is my job to listen to every citizen, regardless of the issue or the opinion. We should continue to strive to be transparent with the citizens of Canfield, and this letter should definitely be read tonight during correspondence. Thank you.
CAO Troke, as requested, before I present my report, would you take this opportunity to provide council with an update on the operational matters as discussed 2 weeks ago at the CAC meeting?
Thank you so much, Mayor Snow. So just quickly, I'd like to touch on the fact that the noise bylaw and some of the suggested pieces that council would like to explore is being put together, so that'll be arriving at the next CAC. The Highgate Plow note, which is being done by Director Bell. Director Bell was trying to reach out directly to the organization who builds and operates these, so there'll be full information available. The municipal boundary review work is moving ahead, so we're looking at both options of consulting versus doing it in-house. And it seems like each municipal unit is doing it a little differently around the valley, so certainly I'll be giving an update to council on that. And on Friday, the police commission meeting, we're gonna have an opportunity to go through the bylaw with the police commission as per the direction from council. So those will be some quick updates in between our two sessions.
Thank you, CAO. Are there any questions for the CAO on these operational matters? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. The G70 meeting, a meeting on G70, sorry. Do we kind of have a sense of when we're looking at doing that? And then the strategic planning, but I mean, that's more internal, but it just,
Right.
those are just two things sort of on my radar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We didn't have a specific date set. We are doing some work kind of to put, for lack of a better word, the straw dog together on this.
Right.
So I spent some time having consultation with the solicitor just around a number of things because he had provided some comments on it with regards to what he thought was the good and the bad of the existing.
Yeah.
And then there's some work internally being done with staff on that, so we can kind of come back with a starting point. Obviously, council at that point can take and do with it whatever they would want, but we're trying to make sure that it's at least covers this really 4 or 5 broad areas before that would come back for that conversation. So we don't have a date yet, but we are working to get that back to council as quick as we can.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, in my report, so all the same meetings. One of the things that I have been doing is the Fcm Roadmap, which is an online class for municipal energy series. And I just finished the 3rd session, and on May 9th, we'll start the 4th session. If anyone has the opportunity to take this, please do. It's very interesting, and I think the really nice part about it is that you get to meet the Fcm staff who are actually putting these grants in place. So one of the things that I have found out is that not only is it of value for municipal buildings, but it's also of value for any buildings within our town that are owned and operated by nonprofits. So if you think of the conversation that we had during our capital budget with regards to the former VIA station and the fact that it's got old windows in it, well, this would fit nicely into granting from the Fcm on that. If you think about the work that, and we had this letter in our last council meeting from the King's Historical Society, and they're looking for a boatload of money, and a lot of that could come through Fcm granting. The other thing with this granting is that they will cover 100% of the evaluation, so the study, and then the rest of it, depending on who you are, you can get grants or you can get loans. So it's a very good program, so highly recommended. If you have the opportunity, please take it. You can see what most of it is. Again, Fcm Roadmap, I'm going to say that I had, this session, we had 2 opportunities to meet with other folks, and one of the things they were talking about was energy equity. So if you've ever seen the briefing from Bridgewater, where they're trying to upgrade buildings based on poverty and particularly energy poverty, this was a really great session. And the other session that I did was with regards to equity in funding. So anyway, really excellent training if you get the opportunity to do this. On the 20th of April, attended investment committee. The fund at the 18th of April was at $14,149,480. LOC was a Zoom meeting. Rules of order, you've heard all of the great things with regards to that, and then a couple meetings along the way. The other thing that I've included in my report is my annual gift statement. As you can see, I accepted $56.59 worth of gifts and lunch in the conduct of my duties, and I submit that for council. And that is my report. Our reports, by virtue of us doing them, become part of the record of council. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. The Fcm Roadmap, So when you talk about, like the old Via Rail station and the old courthouse, and, is that something that we would apply for those grants as a town, or would that be the entity? That would,
For that part, it's the entity.
it's the entity?
So basically what would happen is this was strictly set out for municipal buildings because they identified many years ago that municipal buildings were in very bad shape from an energy conservation perspective.
Right.
And what they've done is they've expanded it. So, for example, Kings County Museum would come under town of Canfield for application, but they would fill out all the application. We would not be the ones
Okay.
doing the work, but it would be under town of Canfield.
Okay, great,
Yep.
thank you.
All right, moving right along to our new business. Our first item under new business is our 2022-2023 Town of Canfield operating budget. And we have a recommendation from our operating budget committee meeting on April the 11th that Canfield Council approve the 2022-2023 operating budget of $14,550,600, and further, that there is no tax increase. The residential rate will remain at $1.5375, and the commercial rate will remain at $3.51 2/5. And if we could have a motion that council approve the 2023 operating budget of $14,550,600, and further that there is no tax rates, that residential rate will remain at $1.5375, and commercial rate will remain at $3.51 2/5. Councillor Huntley, thank you. Councillor York, thank you for the second. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the 2022-2023 operating budget at $14,550,600, and further that there is no tax increase. The residential rate will remain at $1.5375, and commercial rate will remain at $3.51 2/5. And is there any discussion on this matter? Or CAO, did you want to add anything? Because at the budget meeting, we did send staff back to look out a few things for us, and I note that they were all done to excellent.
So thank you, and I think, so the bottom line on this budget has not changed, so based on the direction we had, couple of items, I would turn folks' attention to section 991. There was some discussion around the training budgets and the expense accounts. So for those who would be going to FCM, there was an adjustment made to the accounts to make sure that there would be adequate funding there for folks to go. In addition, because it was 2 versus 3 we're going, which was part of that initial planning, we've also created a training section. We're calling it specific courses. And it's just, there's $3,000 that has been allocated there. So it's just, we moved money around in section 9.1 to accommodate those requests, so that when folks who would go to FCM, NSFM, and do workshops and so on, that they would have the funding there to cover that. The second piece I would point attention to would be under section 19, which is under our community development. And there was the request for KBC for their funding request to go to 95,300. So that's base funding plus the 2,500 included, or 25,000 included. And so those adjustments were put in there. And again, we didn't adjust the bottom line. There is growth on the assessment side that leaving the tax rate the same will provide the majority of that. And so there's no adjustments to any of the rates in order to accommodate that.
Thank you, CAO. Deputy Mayor.
CAO Troke did answer my question. It was with respect to the levy for KBC, so thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion on our operational budget? Are you ready for the question?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
And perhaps it's not the right time.
No?
But as it relates to the KBC budget, they come to us every single year. Is there a way that we can set it so that we can get presented like on a term basis, so they don't have to keep coming in and making the request? That's probably a later on question, so I apologize if this is out of school.
No, so actually, from a timing perspective, you're correct. So this is a one-year, essentially, agreement that would be put in place. So if council is interested in, as the CAO, that I would come back with this year plus an additional year, however folks would like me to do it. What I would suggest is that, I know there used to be a multiple year budget. I would say that basically if one was considering putting more than a 1 year term, that it would go not beyond the life of the sitting council. So at this point, it might be more appropriate to actually maybe do a 2 year. So 1 year with a 1 year kind of forecast to come back. If council's satisfied with that, then we could at least move forward, so they would have at least a 2 year window on where they are.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything further? Are you ready for the question? The question is that council approve the 2022-2023 operating budget of $14,550,600, and further that there is no tax rate increase. The residential rate will remain $1.53 3/4, and the commercial rate will remain $3.51 2/5. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. And our next matter under new business is the Town of Canfield capital budget. So council held a special meeting earlier this evening for presentation of capital investment plan, and from the budget committee meeting for approval of the 2022-23 Town of Canfield capital budget in the amount of $4,544,600, including the funding sources. So a motion that council approve the 2022-23 Town of Canfield capital budget in the amount of $4,544,600, including funding sources, and further that council approves the future years 2023-24 to 2026-27 in principle, including the funding sources. 23-24 is $2,756,300. 24-25 is $2,396,700. 25-26 is $2,058,300. 26-27 is $2,530,000. Someone could move that, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve 2022-23 Town of Canfield capital budget in the amount of $4,544,600, including the funding sources, and further that council approves the future years 2023-24 to 2026-27 in principle, including the funding sources. 23-24, $2,756,300. 24-25, $2,396,700. 25-26, $2,058,300. 26-27, $2,530,000. Is there any discussion on this matter? I would just like to add, for those viewers who did not attend our budget meeting, that it went very well, and the really great thing is that we are below 8% on our debt ratio, and as well, we are starting at 47-cent dollars because of all the work that our staff has done getting grants. And as Councillor Maxwell mentioned, the capital investment plan speaks to both our surface and our below surface infrastructure, and it is a very aggressive plan. And if you look at what we've talked about going outwards and our asset management plan, you can see how we will be capable of renewing all of the infrastructure in our town as we move along. So we're in very good shape for the shape we're in. Is there any further discussion? None? All right, then. Are you ready for the question? The question is to recommend approval of the 2022-23 Town of Canfield capital budget in the amount of $4,544,600, including the funding sources, and further that council approves the future years 2023-24 to 2026-27 in principle, including the funding sources. And I won't repeat the numbers again. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. All right, our next piece of business is an RFD on Heritage Building Bylaw. Councillor Maxwell, you have submitted an RFD. Did you wish to speak to that RFD?
Yes, thank you. I did submit the RFD, and I have a bit more to say about it than what I put on here. I'd received quite a few calls, and it was late one night, and I decided that it was time to do something about this, so I did that up very late. Anyway, so I brought this RFD forward because there is a lot of uncertainty and anxiety in our community right now concerning the sale of the old Cornwallis Inn, or Main Street Station as we call it now, and the two buildings to the east, including Oakdale House, which is also a heritage building. It's the lack of information, or I can honestly say that I am also affected by this sale as a lifelong resident of this town. It's the lack of information that drives the uncertainty that I'm sure I'm not the only councillor receiving. I think there's probably things been said to others of you. Longtime residents have seen buildings sold and destroyed that reflected the character, sense of place, and identity for the people of Canfield. I believe the old Cornwallis Inn is the most iconic building in town and is what people see as our sense of place and identity. It is the epitome of the character of this town. The loss of this building would be devastating for many in the town as well as the surrounding communities. There are many other buildings that still exist in town that should have some sort of protection. A few I can think of right off the top of my head are the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the county courthouse, the King's Arm Pub, just to name a few. There are also some old homes in town that also need protection from a heritage building or property bylaw. I understand that it may be harder to renovate historical buildings. However, I think a bylaw could be worded to allow renovations to take place smoothly. In my mind, I am thinking the facades are the most important aspect of preservation of most of the buildings. So, of course, the Cornwallis Inn would be a slight exception because I would be wanting to look after that first floor as well, but or the floor that where you normally would enter, not the bottom part. I am thinking developers are very good today at taking heritage buildings and renovating while maintaining the historical integrity. I am thinking of the condos recently built in Annapolis Royal in the old Annapolis Academy, and of course our own library in the old United Church building. Imagine if we had protected the old KCA building and used it for housing or other business ventures. These historical buildings are valuable to communities as they have an aesthetic importance that often showcases the old valuable materials that we don't get to work with today, and the workmanship, which we don't see that often in newer buildings. They add character to the area while often attracting investment and tourism opportunities. They give a town character and a sense of community, as well as having an environmental benefit, which I think is extremely important that we recognize, where preservation is the greatest form of recycling. Repairing old buildings uses energy and material resources more efficiently and reduces waste. UNESCO in 2011 made a statement that urban heritage is a social, cultural, and economic asset. And a UN report in 2017 states new guidelines for planning, development, and implementation need to be created that include cultural and architectural heritage. Those of you who have traveled to Europe or plan to, I ask you, is it not the old culture and preserved history you want to see? While we live in the so-called New World, we are beginning to have our own history, which we should preserve and showcase for the same reasons. Leaving you with this thought: preserving our heritage is important as it adds character and distinctiveness to the town and our region. This aids in giving our citizens a sense of identity. It is time to put a bylaw in place that will help us protect our important historical buildings and properties for the benefit of the citizens and the town of Canfield. And so in this RFD, I'm recommending that council would direct the CAO to have staff develop a bylaw that will protect the heritage buildings and properties in Canfield, and to return their draft to council by the June 22nd council meeting, the June 2022 council meeting. And so that's my RFD that I'm bringing to council, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Prior to taking commentary, CAO, you have received the RFD with regards to the Building Heritage Bylaw. Can you provide council with an update and a plan for disposition of the request?
Absolutely, thank you, Mayor Snow. So what I would do, and the request, what we would do first is do a report back to council on what we see as bylaws on other municipal units, kind of some of the feedback we would get by contacting them, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever would exist with those. So at least from a discussion perspective, we would all see at least what's out there, and maybe perhaps what is effective or not effective in other areas. We would bring that back, and then based on the direction that I get from council on that, we would then go and move forward with whether it was a bylaw or whatever else would come out of that from a discussion perspective. We would then put our heads to putting that together. So I would suggest we would try and do a quick jurisdictional scan and a report that would come back to council, and then next steps would be council to direct staff from there.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Maxwell, does that meet the requirements of your RFD as a starting point?
Thank you. Yes, I think it does. It's something that I think that we need to start an action on. And yes, if we can do that in a timely fashion, I think yes, that certainly satisfies.
Thank you, Councillor York.
Thank you. So I've had a lot of the same conversations and phone calls from residents specifically about the Main Street Station building. But my question, and perhaps I'm not understanding, and somebody could shed some light, but most of these buildings that have been identified are privately owned. So how does that impact, is it like an application process where we strongly encourage, and perhaps this will come out in the course of a report writing, but then also how new green initiatives and accessibility requirements could also be included so that we don't, make buildings inaccessible in order to preserve historic facades. And I want to make it clear that I am in favor of obviously keeping as many historic facades as we can, but also keeping in mind that we have to ensure that these spaces can be used by all residents. So I guess those are my two questions. If buildings are privately owned, how does that impact? And then how do we marry both the green initiatives and accessibility initiatives that we have as a town with a bylaw like that?
So thank you. So first of all, typically it is application based.
Okay.
So normally you would have individuals who would typically want to have some kind of designation. In addition, normally it also is typically tied to tourism promotion and all those other pieces. So there's usually an avenue there. The question and the nitty gritty you get into around the second part is typically energy initiatives or green initiatives and trying to keep the look of a building generally drive costs up. So is there a carrot that normally goes in order to, whether you're subsidizing it, whether you're supporting it, or what have you. And it's always a bit of a, kind of one of those fine lines. I think also it kind of gets to a point of also thinking through, and obviously we'll come back with what we see, but also kind of where do you kind of do cutoff lines with regards to, you know, what is a heritage property versus not a heritage property. So, for example, in another jurisdiction I worked in, typically a heritage property would be something that would be older than 1900. But that was their decision because they had a number of old homes that were kind of in that 1880 range. So, but others might say, no, look, basically from whatever date, this is the date that kind of is typically used. So those are some of those things, and sometimes it's actually more related to a specific sector. So if a town was known for a sector, so whether it was a hotel or whatever, sometimes those are the things that become the triggering points. And then obviously, this is about wanting people to be part of what you're doing. So it is very much typically an application process.
And I guess as a follow-up, at the risk of being in a Joni Mitchell song, if a property is once designated heritage and then is sold, does that designation remain with the sale of the property? Is that something we can also look at?
Normally, there is, remember, the province has its own designation program, and the federal government has its own designation program. And so I can just speak to, for example, a building that I was involved with had a federal designation, and there is a period that if you felt that you want to withdraw, you could, but it was a fairly long period of time.
Okay.
Now, I do know, for example, in places like HRM, who have their own designation program in a municipality, there is a period of time in order to get in and a period of time to get out. So, and without, you know, too many details around it, normally, if there's a plaque on a building when it is sold, that plaque usually goes with it. But also, it is one of those pieces that if there is not anything on the building, typically, you know, what you would normally do is whoever is buying it, sit down with them and try and find out where they're trying to go, what do they want to do, and how does that marry up with something maybe that may be attractive to have a heritage designation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I just would like to ask Councillor Maxwell for some clarification around the sentence. I realize the new bylaw would not be applied to this sale. You're not looking at restricting the sale of heritage properties?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. That's just, as I said, I did that up one night. It was very late, and you know, I didn't know what was going on, what was taking place at all, and I thought, I don't know how to make up one of these bylaws or anything, and I was just saying, no, maybe that would have to be something grandfathered. I don't know, but so that's why I read something else instead of what I have read.
Thank you.
Thank you. So CAO, you have what you need to
Yes.
have staff, Deputy Mayor.
Oh, sorry, yes, just one quick thing. So, when you talk about it being application-based, so in your experience, or have you been in other municipalities where they've had these types of, do typically people apply for their properties to be heritage protected?
So there's an education piece you have to do as to
Yes.
why you would or wouldn't, because there's all kinds of
I would think.
there's all kinds of stories that people hear, especially if you have a building that's maybe 100 years old or older.
Right.
And so there's fairly good documentation out there if you were going to go provincial or heritage or federal heritage designations. Municipal ones, I think, though, you want to make sure that you would want to have as much information available as possible. And for those places that might be a site that would be designated, you want to make sure that those owners have the information. So, and it might be as simple as, you know, a phone call and say, just so you know, and here's what we can do. And so you make sure that there's dialogue, so there's no false information. But that education piece takes a bit of time, because a lot of folks also have a fear that if I do this and then I ever want to make a change, then I
Yeah,
can't. Well,
exactly.
no, it's kind of one of those things where you
Okay.
want to make sure that people are aware of what it is, what it means, And again, my experience has been the more you can tie it to something like this is a notable thing that someone who is in a business would want to, you know, say, here's a reason why you would want to come here, then sometimes that's a nice little feature. I will honestly say that it is not always easy to have that conversation, because sometimes even with all the information, people are a little bit afraid of it. But at the same time, it's just key about getting that information in the hands, and then people can make their decision.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor York.
Sorry. Is it perhaps relevant to loop in the Canfield Historical Society as it relates to an education piece? Maybe they want to weigh in at this juncture as well?
I think it is that, and also to think about is it when folks would, if you go down this road and you have a bylaw, does it also become a multiple type of designation? So would it be municipal and provincial, you know, those kinds of things? Because there may already be a fairly good basket of stuff that could help out, especially if you're marrying fairly close what might already be a provincial type designation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Probably people don't know, but there are already a couple of provincially designated heritage buildings in Canfield. Wickwire House is one, that they went ahead and did that on their own.
Yep.
The Terry House is another one, that are provincially designated. So, you know, I think it's just something that we need to do, and I think most owners, like the King's Arm Pub, I mean, it's a beautiful building. You want people to know that your building is beautiful, and you want people to come and see it. And so just having a designation would increase tourism in that particular business. So, you know, I think it's something we need to do, I think.
Got what you need?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. And we're moving on to the Valley Waste Capital Plan. So we have a request from Valley Waste to fund year one of a 10-year capital replacement plan. And it is recommended that council reject the request for capital funding by Valley Waste Resource Management based on past and current Town of Canfield financial practices and procedures. CEO Troke, can you provide us further information on this matter?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So in everyone's package, there is a 10-year capital plan that's been put together. So at our last meeting, it was requested that I request this of Valley Waste, which they provided. I did redact out one item and one total, and the reason is there's a negotiative process going on around something that I do not want to be out in the public. So that's a redacted line item. But what you can see is they certainly have a number of items that they are moving, you know, towards trying to some of their heavier equipment, like roll-off trucks. They're in need of replacing over time. But also, what you're going to see is that their sorting building itself has a relatively big price tag over a 2-year period. The equipment reserve that was requested is really not going towards kind of year one or year two in any of these costs. And I think as to the mayor's comment that Canfield traditionally has kept these reserves ourselves, and we put them in our own reserve fund, and then when needed, they get dispensed. And part of that is obviously you get the interest if they're in your own reserve fund. But also, I think it's one of those things that in a world where, you know, a portion of any budget is also made up of borrowing. So, you know, you look at it from a perspective, would you borrow to put it into another organization's reserve account? And so, certainly from a perspective of Canfield would definitely be accumulating a reserve with regards to Valley Waste. And certainly that it is in a position where in order to fund items as requested, that it can go down the road of doing that. And I think in this case here, you'll see that the plan that has been rolled out really is fairly intensive with 23, 24, and 24. Well, really it's 22, 23, and 23, 24. And those are not really indicative of an equipment reserve item. They're going to be indicative of our operating account and borrowing that's going to go to cover those items.
Thank you, CAO. So if we put this to a motion, that council reject the request for capital funding by Valley Waste Resource Management to fund year one of a 10-year capital replacement based on past and current Town of Canfield financial practices and procedures. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council reject the request for capital funding by Valley Waste Resource Management to fund year one of a 10-year capital replacement based on past and current Town of Canfield financial practices and procedures. Is there any discussion on this matter? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the message then back to Valley Waste is, are we anticipating that that message will be consistent with the other partners? And if it's not consistent with the other partners, what does that mean? Bit of a loose question, but.
So
you
I
may know too.
I actually don't know what the other partners have or have not done at this point. I know
Okay.
people are in different points in their budget cycle.
Right.
I think the approach that, has always been taken, if there's a request or a need for funding, Canfield looks at that request
Right.
or need.
Okay.
So, for example, if Valley Waste said that 51,000 was needed for a capital item in this year or next year, then we would simply put that in our budget rather than in a reserve that may or may not be tapped into for a period of time.
Great. That sounds good. Thank you.
So one of the things to remember as well, Canfield has always held the money that's come back to us in a reserve. And we've been very good at using that in these cases for funding things. And as the CEO said, we get the interest on it. All right, is there any further discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is that council reject the request for capital funding by Valley Waste Resource Management to fund year one of a 10-year capital replacement based on past and current Town of Canfield financial practices and procedures. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. And on the matter of correspondence, CAO?
As referenced earlier by Councillor Zabian, we did have an email come in from Marissa McNeil, and Marissa was asking some questions with regards to the Robinson property. That email has been circulated to council, so council has the information as per the request from Marissa McNeil.
Thank you. All right, well, there's pretty scarce in the audience this evening, so we'll move into our in-camera. The council has a legal matter which must be conducted in a closed session. We require a motion to go into the closed session to discuss the agenda item. We will not be returning to Facebook Live for completion of the meeting or adjournment. So the motion is to move into a closed session to discuss the agenda item. Thank you, and Councillor Maxwell for the second. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the council move into a closed session. The question is on adoption of the motion to move into a closed session. All those in favor? The motion is carried, and the time is 7:46.